Unpleasant, but not necessary. Those are the words Met Police Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley used to describe strip searching children. Sorry, he said unpleasant, but necessary. Rowley said it was tragic children were being drawn into serious crime, but he backed his officers to use the power to keep the public safe. When asked how he could justify it, Rowley responded with this.
If a 16-year-old has a significant quantity of drugs in their underwear, if we then put them in a cell and they swallow them, police officers will be investigated for manslaughter. If children have potentially dangerous items on them, we have a duty to search them and remove them. And it's horrible and unpleasant, but it's necessary.
The issue gained national attention in 2020 when a 15-year-old schoolgirl known as Child Q was strip searched while menstruating after being wrongly accused of carrying cannabis. 3 unnamed officers are facing gross misconduct proceedings over the incident and could face dismissal. It's a difficult one, I understand that much. If the police were using these powers properly, then I'd say, fair, fine, it's fine to do. But what we do know is that they're not. And 80% of stop and searches end in nothing. So it's not as if, oh, we're doing all these stop and searches, stopping all these kids, and guess what? We're getting 80% of them finding they've got some crime, I don't know, they're carrying knives, they've got drugs, whatever. But we know for a fact from the stats, from the Met themselves, that the police are saying, you smell of cannabis. And the people are saying, well, I've no cannabis on me, and I'm not smoking cannabis, and no one around smoking cannabis. Those people are then being stopped and searched, and then they're finding nothing, which means the police are not using these powers fairly, so I'm kind of like, well, no, actually, unless your officers can do this properly and fairly, you shouldn't have the power.
And I think that's the point, isn't it? Which is properly and fairly, and also doing it in a way that is not harming to the community. But also, I think we've got 2 very different kind of searches going on. One is drugs, obviously, and that could be done perhaps with other ways. We know that sniffer dogs and various other things are really effective.
Yeah.
And at least as a first stage, so that you can use that. And the second thing is, arches to deal with knives. We know that knives are a problem. We know that kids are carrying them around of, a whole range of reasons, and that arches could be used. And again, it's one thing to take a child through that and say, we just want to check that you're safe and check that and it's not demeaning. I think the mental scars of this, and as you say, the profiling that goes on, particularly in an urban environment, where frankly, I think we now recognise that it can be any child of any colour, of any background, who could be carrying drugs or indeed knives and things. And we just have to have a much better way of dealing with it so it's no longer stigmatised, but it is something that we really have to focus on to make sure that we take them off the streets.
This is the thing, is that because of the reasons you said, that we don't, just don't trust the police at all to use these powers effectively, it should just never be done to children. Never, ever. I just don't think that there's an excuse for it. I think this is there's real issues of adultification of children, especially black children that are stereotypes. I just think there really is no excuse for this. What happened with Child Q was just so distressing, so unnecessary, a really, really horrible case that was allowed by the police officers, but also the people that should have been looking after that particular child at school and didn't do that. So I just don't think...
We know what happens.
Yeah, and
we know what happens if you say we're not going to.
Absolutely. And I think there is alternatives. Knife archers, like you said, sniffer dogs, like you said. If you absolutely have to ask a child to take off a jacket, maybe, nobody needs to be naked in any way, shape or form. You need to make sure that you have an appropriate adult there. And the fact that this is happening without appropriate adults, and we know that happens across the board, that doesn't need to happen at all. It's completely unnecessary.
Well, I would say we've got to be very careful about one particularly horrible and tawdry case affecting, coming up with blanket concepts as a result of it. And what I would say is we know county lines gangs are deliberately using children to transport drugs. A lot of them are carrying weapons. A 15-year-old with a knife is as dangerous as a 21-year-old with a knife. So I think we've got to be semi-realistic about this. I agree with what everyone has said in terms of doing it respectfully, having an appropriate adult, making sure that certain people are not being targeted for no reason. But children these days are being caught up in very nefarious criminal underworlds. They're being deliberately used by, particularly unscrupulous gangs, and that is a danger to society at large. And there's this other argument goes on now that people suddenly say, well, a 16-year-old carrying a knife is a child, but fine, when they want to vote, they're an adult. Make up your mind.
No, 16 is not. In the law, 16 would not be classed as a child. 15 is, 16 is different. However, I would say, if you want to stop drugs and to stop county line gangs, guess what? cocaine is not bought by the urban kids on the street.
no, I agree with
It's
you.
bought by people in
Yeah.
Westminster.
Yeah.
It's bought by bankers.
Oh,
it's by the
totally.
middle classes, the people who were down Chelsea on a Friday night.
it comes
so
down
if the
to the-
police
yeah.
were going stopping and searching those white people down Chelsea and in Westminster, they'd find a lot of drugs. It'd be a better than an 8% no outcome rate they currently have.
I'd imagine they'd have a field day in Parliament.